You have made it to week 16, the semifinals of the fantasy football playoffs. I'm bringing you 8 high upside players that you should be plugging and playing, depending on if you are struggling with injuries or any other inconsistencies coming into this week. So let's get straight into those upside players. My first high upside player going into week 16, maybe you're struggling with injuries. Maybe you have a Justin Herbert. Maybe you had a Geno Smith. Maybe you had a Sam Howell who's been a little bit inconsistent nowadays. But someone like a Baker Mayfield that you could pick up, plug and play going into week 16 that does have a favorable matchup as he's playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who currently give up the top 10 most points to the quarterback position in fantasy points. Baker Mayfield went off this past week against the Green Bay Packers, 22 for 28, over 380 yards, over 37 fantasy points. If you're looking for some high upside, he's been averaging 17.1 fantasy points per game specifically, which has been really great so far this year. Top 15 quarterback on the year, someone like a Baker Mayfield, and he has those high upside player weapons around him, like a Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, who's been going off, up and down so far this year, and also Rachaad White, who's been a consistent top 5, top 8 running back so far all this year, which has been incredible. So if you do need a high upside play, once again, averaging 17.1 fantasy points per game and playing a favorable matchup, who currently gives up a good amount of points to the quarterback position, Baker Mayfield is a high upside play. My second high upside play, going to the other side of the ball at the wide receiver position, Parker Washington, coming in from Penn State. One of my favorite wide receivers coming out of college as well. 5'10", 210 pounds. Somebody that I said can play the slot and the outside, who had really big, reliable hands, coming in, having some opportunity going into week 16. Now, this is a massive and risky play if you don't have the depth. But if you're going into this week and you are struggling at the wide receiver position, or you just don't have any inconsistencies, maybe you can go based off matchup here, because there are plenty opportunities for Parker Washington. We've seen, Christian Kirk going out with that groin injury. We've seen Zay Jones most likely, not going to be playing going into week 16. Calvin really has been there. Trevor Lawrence is getting better and has been playing and peppering Evan Ingram. But somebody else in that room needs to step up. And we've seen that with Parker Washington in the past weeks 13 and 14. Right? Caught 6 out of 6 targets in week 13, over 60 yards and a touchdown, over 17 fantasy points. Week 14 against Cleveland, right? Caught 3 out of 2 and a touchdown, 8 fantasy points. Not too much opportunity. But when you think of going against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who currently give up the most points to the wide receiver position currently, they're averaging 43.2 fantasy points giving up to opposing wide receivers. Parker Washington is somebody that can step in to that opportunity if you need him, right? Once again, not somebody you should be necessarily relying on. Maybe you're in a deeper league, 14, 16, or even higher. If you need a good solid flex going based off matchup, Parker Washington could be that guy for you going into week 16. My second high upside player going into this week, and this one's a little bit shaky based off matchup, and that is Joshua Palmer for the Los Angeles Chargers here. He is playing the Buffalo Bills at home, which is really favorable, in LA. He has Easton Stick as the quarterback still, and you never know, you might see another quarterback change with whoever, Will Grier might step in, whatever the case may look like. Keenan Allen doesn't look like he's going to be playing in week 16. Quentin Johnson hasn't been a massive factor. The only person they truly can rely on is Josh Palmer. Not only that, someone like an Austin Eckler, who clearly has seen that RB arch so far in fantasy and no longer a fantasy relevant asset, unfortunately, because he's hit that age in that peak. Joshua Palmer is the only fantasy relevant asset on this team that could potentially produce. Now, last week, coming off of that injury against Las Vegas Raiders where they were getting blown out, he did get a blown coverage where he was wide open. He does score that touchdown. He has over 100 yards, over 21 fantasy points, but only caught 4 out of 4 targets, right? I think they're going to come back with a new head coach or interim head coach, with a new regime, with a new game plan, going against the Buffalo Bills, who have talent, who has been on the hot streak after playing the Dallas Cowboys and really surprising everyone and beating them, Joshua Palmer could come in here and see those targets, which we have seen in the past. We've seen the 7 targets, so over 15, 18 fantasy points. We've seen him flourish without Keenan Allen in the past, just not with the quarterback play that we have currently. If this was Justin Herbert in this lineup, I would say you should be starting him with confidence no matter what this looks like, no matter what playoff game, no matter what, essentially. But now you have to tread with light, and I know this is the playoffs, but once again, if you're in a 14, 16, or even bigger league, and you're saying, hey, Joshua Palmer, somebody that I need, maybe Tyreek Hill is not going to play, maybe you have someone like a Keenan Allen, that Joshua Palmer you can plug and play. These are the type of situations you have to look for that you've probably been planning for all along. So I would say Joshua Palmer could be a great high upside play going into week 16. All right, my next wide receiver on this list, going to Dallas, Brandon Cooks is a phenomenal high upside play going into this week after, the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott couldn't get anything going against the Buffalo Bills, playing a big, I guess you could say, not a juggernaut team when you think about the Buffalo Bills, but a team that we all, put in high regards. They finally have a bounce back big win like the Dallas Cowboys. Now you look at the Miami Dolphins, who has been struggling with injuries. Is Tyreek Hill going to play this week? The Dallas Cowboys could bounce back, and in my opinion, they're going to do that with a statement, and Brandon Cooks is going to be a part of that. We've seen those big high upside games where he gets 9 targets, 10 targets, and has 32 plus fantasy points. We've seen the even medium games where he gets 17, 15, but we've also seen that low floor where he only gets 2 to 3 fantasy points. But coming back to this game, having this game script, understanding that this could be someone they could be seeing down the road, potentially in the Super Bowl if both of these teams make it, that Brandon Cooks could easily come out here having the highest scoring fantasy points in this offense. I would say outside of CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, he could be the 3rd highest scoring wide receiver on this team, or in this matchup, right? If you really think about it. Now, the Miami Dolphins have been up and down when it comes down to giving fantasy points to the wide receiver position. When you look at schedule adjusted fantasy points given, the Miami Dolphins currently give up 34.9 fantasy points per game, which is still pretty significant in top 12 going to opposing wide receivers. So if you do need a high upside play, once again, you had a Keenan Allen, maybe you're struggling with the wide receivers, whatever that may look like. Maybe Tyreek Hill doesn't play. Like I said earlier, Brandon Cooks could be a perfect plug and play. All right, and my last wide receiver on my high upside list, let's go to Cincinnati with Tyler Boyd. And kind of same thing what I've been saying all throughout this video. If you are someone that has a Keenan Allen, the Jamar Chases, the Tyreek Hills, and you need somebody to plug and play that has that high upside, Tyler Boyd definitely does, because we've seen the success without Jamar Chase. We've seen the success where he can come in and step in when Tyler Boyd was injured in the middle parts of the season, scoring over 19 fantasy points, 16 fantasy points, getting those 8, 7 plus 9 plus targets we've seen in the game. That's exactly what you want to see here. And I have confidence in Jake Browning and how he can move the ball down the field. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers technically are really good against the passing game. They currently give up the 5th fewest points to the wide receiver position. But what I am encouraged by is that Mitch Trubisky or Mason Rudolph or whoever's going to be the quarterback is not going to be able to stay on the field. And Tyler Boyd and the Cincinnati Bengals are going to have a massive, advantage in time of possession when you think of them driving the ball down the field. I will not be surprised if someone like Tyler Boyd does find the end zone. Now, yes, there's 2 sides of the coin there. He can only get 2 to 5 targets, and he only maybe has 5, 6, 7, 8 fantasy points. That is true. But in a game where they technically have to win, trying to make it into the fantasy playoffs with Jake Browning, a game that they really technically need to win, especially with all these other teams getting jumbled there in the AFC. I'll be starting Tyler Boyd with confidence going into week 16. All right, let's go to the running back position. This is one of 2 running backs, and then I have a defense, and then that is the video. But if you do need a high upside running back, or maybe somebody that you are uncomfortable with in starting, I'm going to give you some reasons why you should be starting him. That is James Conner. James Conner coming off a fantastic bounce back game against the San Francisco 49ers here. 14 tokes, 86 yards, 6.1 yards per carry, and a touchdown, over 17 fantasy points. Now he's going against the Chicago Bears, who technically is a tougher matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers. But what I do know is that the Chicago Bears have been struggling on defense. I would say that we have seen the Bears, give up significant amount of points to the opposing running backs. We've seen it in the past couple of weeks, specifically with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, even with Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt. Now you come here with James Conner, who is going to be getting the opportunities in the air and in the goal line, specifically when you think of Kyler Murray and this offense moving the ball down the field. Now, it's not James Conner fault that he's been inconsistent. I think it's more of the whole product of the offense. If anything, he has been the most consistent running back or player on this field when he is healthy. You think of when he comes back up from that injury, 4.5 yards per carry, 4.3, 4.5, 4.2, and then 6.1. Those are above average numbers when you think of a running back coming back. And James Conner, before his injury, was a top 15, top 18 running back. The opportunity is still there for James Conner. And once again, the Chicago Bears defense hasn't been the best as a whole, but has been good in stopping the run. But coming off a big game for James Conner, them seeing how efficient he is, hopefully they're going to give him the ball at Chicago as well. So I will be starting James Conner with some confidence. All right, my last running back on this list. Let's go all the way to Denver. Javonte Williams should have a phenomenal and a high upside matchup going against the New England Patriots. Playing at home at the Mile High. Javonte Williams coming off a somewhat of a dud week here against the Detroit Lions, but now playing at home, playing the New England Patriots, who currently just give up a lot of points when you think of Clyde Edwards-Helaire catching 4 out of 4 and 64 yards and a touchdown, right? Over 20 fantasy points. Jet McKinnon finding the end zone, throwing a touchdown as well, having over 18 fantasy points. Javonte Williams should, and no doubt in my mind, is probably going to have a really good game going against the New England Patriots. Again, another team and another opportunity for this team to take and go into the fantasy, or not the fantasy playoffs, but the real life playoffs and your fantasy playoffs, right? They're trying to make it to the playoffs. This is a must-win game. And if they can move the ball down the field and or find the end zone, this is exactly, for Javonte Williams, this is exactly what you want when you think of a high upside opportunity. Maybe you're saying, well, Javonte didn't have the best game in week 15, but he had better games, since week 10. 21 fantasy points, 10 fantasy points, 10 fantasy points, 18 fantasy points. Let's look at those numbers instead of the bad numbers, as he's continued being another week removed from that ACL. More opportunity is going to be coming his way. So start Javonte Williams with some confidence. All right, and last but not least, going to a defense side of the ball. If you do play with defenses, one of the best matchups here for a defense, the Green Bay Packers versus the Carolina Panthers. And I keep this short and sweet. The Carolina Panthers have been struggling, still can't move the ball down the field, even though they did win. And shout out to the Carolina Panthers for beating Arthur Smith, and just beating Arthur Smith because we want him out of a job, respectfully, for the fantasy world, right? He's not utilizing his weapons in the right way. But the Green Bay Packers going against the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers currently averaging 12.2 fantasy points to opposing defenses. And once again, another team trying to win in the hunt to get into the NFC playoff side. This is exactly what you want here. And we've seen the success of this defense really take it to the next level here. When you think of the Detroit game, the Rams game, you think of these teams that they've played in the past who have been struggling. The Green Bay Packers could easily get those sacks, those interceptions, with those fumbles here against the Carolina Panthers. Guys, I really hope this is helpful. Good luck going into week 16, the semifinals of the fantasy playoffs. We have been here all year, and this is going to be the last video for you guys. We'll have some other stuff on our Dynasty channel, so make sure you definitely stay tuned on our Dynasty channel. But we appreciate each and every one of you. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year's, and as always, It's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.